Yeah, so again, thanks everyone for joining us today to hear Adam talk a bit about best interest advice during volatile markets. So without further ado, we have Adam Holt, our founder and CEO.
Thank you, Allison, and welcome everybody. Thanks for taking the time out of your probably quite busy schedule to join us today. In terms of just in the interest of disclosure, there are some things that I realize when I put into this that are my views, right? They don't represent necessarily company or investment advice or otherwise, because many of you know that I've been in the business for 22 some years. And this is really kind of how I'm choosing to interpret best interest advice. So let me share with you what we're going to talk about for the next 30 some minutes. Number one, I'm going to share with you at a high level where best interest advice is today. Clearly, we know there's some regulation coming as soon as June. That might change, of course, who knows? But I think it's important for us as advisors or people in the field supporting advisors to really understand where we are today and where this thing is going and what's possible. And I'm going to share with you a kind of an anecdote that we've been thinking about for the last 10 years about what typically works in other professionals and how they've dealt with, we'll call it best interest or malpractice. And then, of course, I think what this really comes down to is how do you prove and defend it? And that really comes down to process. I'm going to show that to you. And then, of course, I'm going to share with you what we're thinking about and what we're building currently that's going to help support the advisor journey on this stuff and really lock it up so that we can not have, we'll call it fear around this topic. So hopefully that's valuable. And then we're going to jump to questions and answers. I probably figure that'll be at about the 25-minute mark. So please do write your questions on the side. We do keep everybody muted to not cause distraction. And of course, dogs barking and the kids screaming in the background. Okay, so let's kind of talk about this first. And I thought this quote from Tamara Frankel, who's a law professor and scholar at Boston, and she indicated to this that really the following, right? So there's this question about fiduciary duty applies with one person as responsibility for the assets or property of another person. That makes sense. The fiduciary must act in the best interest of the person who has entrusted those assets. However, there is a big difference between the suitability standard that many of you recall FINRA puts upon broker-dealer representatives, and the fiduciary standard, okay? But the challenge is for most customers as well as advisors, nobody really understands this distinction. And I think the real big interest between these two components is that fiduciary standard is an ongoing duty. It's not a point of sale or point of advice moment like suitability is, where you have to prove that at the point in time this made sense. Fiduciary standard actually expands suitability to go as an ongoing requirement. And I think that's pretty straightforward, right? For most of us who are either fiduciary or have a suitability standard or both if dually registered, then the reality is that we have to kind of think about this as a continuous suitability check. What can we do to make sure that we're acting in our client's best interest consistently and that what we've actually recommended or placed over the years still serves them? I think that's really funny. Now, most of the advisors I talk to tend to feel this way, right? Which is we hear from our organizations or our firms, or if we're an independent RIA, we have maybe an outlet or consultant that's supporting us. Right? Most of us think that we're already acting in our client's best interest. Why do we now need all of a sudden this process? And I think if you think past the process and all the work that's necessary, it's really actually about defending oneself. If someone were to call you out and say, well, no, you did not act in my best interest, and you did not follow a standard that was eliciting a prudent process for coming up with the recommendations, right? So it turns out that the reality of a lot of this, just like DOL was several years back, the Department of Labor best interest rule, was ultimately about how are advisors going to defend this, and what is the implication to actually being found not to have acted in someone's best interest, right? Could you be sued personally? Is that what we're talking about now? Is E&O no longer an issue here? And so I think the real big issue that nobody's talking about is how do I actually defend it? Now, granted, I could have process up front, but we haven't really seen what this might look like. And so what we tend to see in best interest advice in 2020, in terms of my readings and the research we've done as a firm, is clearly whether you're an RIA and have an ADV or an investment advisory representative and have an ADV, that must be provided to all these clients. And if you're a broker dealer, there's a new form CRS, which is basically what's the relationship summary between us and what's my obligations to you as an advisor. That these things are going to be two independent documents that we have to provide the client at the point of every single advice moment, which basically means in a broker-dealer world that we're theoretically, every new account is going to have to be providing a CRS, or what is my obligations to you as your advisor. That's what the best interest standard will be wrapped up into. And also there's a kind of consistent message that we need to obviously disclose and therefore avoid conflicts of interest, which means we're going to start to need to show, disclose, and of course display the fact that if we're selling a product that has some component of compensation to it and it's not fee-based entirely or hourly or flat fee, that clearly that's going to have to be disclosed and documented. So we're not going to see a reduction in the documentation that we're going to need. Now, I think that the other question about whether you're a fiduciary or not is a real interesting question, because it seems to me that with most advisors, and again, having been in the business for a couple of decades, I never knew any different than doing what's right for the client. I thought that was the point of this business. And so I think a lot of you on the call kind of relate to the fact that we take care of people in ways they have no understanding of. And sometimes we get compensated well for that, and sometimes we don't get compensated at all for it. But that's just kind of the way it goes. I think it's the standard that doctors should pretty much hold out for themselves and most other professionals who are operating at a high level of ethics. But the reality is there's still a good percentage of the population, I don't know what that population size is, that doesn't always act in the best interest or is clearly misaligned in terms of what they're delivering to their client. And I think the question of fiduciary is going to get prolific, and I'll talk about that in a second when I show where we're going. Other components that we picked up in most of this regulation is about reasonable compensation. That's not a big surprise. We all know that compensation is in flux to a degree because there's a lot of pressure on now even asset management, regardless of whether there's, even though we've seen a big lift in annuity production, and I think life insurance is coming back in many ways. And we are seeing other companies that are doing single lines of business, let's say multi-line business in property and casualty, getting into the life and the broker-dealer side. They're going to have to deal with this in a whole nother way than we've ever kind of contemplated, because they're not necessarily used to being at a fiduciary level. And we're wondering whether this is going to expand to their lines of delivery. Suitability is going to still stand. And of course, as I said already, suitability is going to be a continuous process if we do move closer to fiduciary as a rule. I don't think this thing is letting up. I think we're going to see some form of best interest requirement in all levels of the industry and the society, expecting that we're protecting consumers. There are, for those of you that are thinking about it, there are a couple of lawsuits currently against the SEC, who is the primary bringer of the best interest regulation, that indicates that it might get pushed or thrown out and pass the June 30th deadline for execution. Of course, with COVID here, that might also cause people to take a pause in implementation. But so far, we think that there's going to be some form of regulation. And if you've noticed anything about New York and their insurance commissions, you'll see that 187 recently came out. It is attempting to move best interest regulation around life and annuity. So this is obviously not going in the other direction. I think the real key to a lot of this is going to be around documentation and what the expectations are around there, mostly because the conversation around best interest, especially in these volatile markets where people are feeling like, hey, they were slighted in some regard. I think you're going to see a big number of attorneys get a hold of clients who are upset that they lost money and say, hey, they were in the wrong things. And there's going to be a slew of this, as we saw in 2008. And 2009, the kind of fallout of real big market movements. So I think the big awareness for everybody who's in the field and thinking about what does this mean for me in my practice, you clearly are going to have to make sure that you document, because I think it's going to be the surprise client that maybe hasn't been talked to a while, you thought everything was great. They get a hold of someone in their ear saying, hey, you were in the wrong risk profile. And so therefore we should just sue because we can. And I think that does happen, unfortunately. So let's talk about that. I also think that, I think in terms of the future, where we're going, as I've said already, we already seen that life and annuity is moving towards this at a state level, where state insurance commissions actually are are pretty much dictating what's going to happen with respect to procedures and licensing, as well as compliance and best interest. But gosh, I don't see this escaping banking and lending and potentially the tax and legal sides as well. We've already, in our experience, have seen advice that didn't align around tax, and of course there are malpractice opportunities there. But I think it even could hit property and casualty, especially as we, and I'm not saying that's tomorrow, I'm saying that I could see this in the next 5 years, a best interest regulation for advice around all financial products. So we really need to think about what's going to happen when we arrive 5 years from now. Are we going to have the procedures in place to protect ourselves and our practices and our staff from what could be a fallout of a huge money opportunity for a lot of attorneys? I'll say it that way, because I tend to think that that tends to drive the motivation in many cases, unfortunately. Not to say that there aren't really, legitimate claims out there, because clearly there are, but I think that we've seen a lot of motivation there. And here's what I think it means for all of us. And by the way, you probably already know I'm a closet cartoonist. Yes, I draw these cartoons. And I thought that this was kind of interesting. I drew this back when DOL was big, but I realized that it's actually really apropos today. And the takeaway from this is there's a joke, a parable, however you want to call it, where two people are in the woods and they both see a bear, and one of them leans down to put on their sneakers, and the other person says, "What are you doing? We can't outrun the bear, right? We can't outrun the bear." And person with the sneakers replies, we don't need to outrun the bear, we need to outrun each other. Now, what does that mean? We are seeing that if an advisor or a group or a firm or whatever you think is not taking action today, they're going to basically be part of the pack, and the pack is going to be gobbled up in no short order by these different regulations that are going to come. And not just on the regulatory side, but on the fallout side, the defense side from actual lawsuits and so forth, I think are going to come out of this opportunity for people to come after financial advisors. And so I think the point is that we got to get our sneakers on today, and we need to start being prepared for this in advance so that we don't capture the brunt of this. And that's really what I'm getting at today. Interestingly enough, I've been kind of playing with this idea forever, but the reality is that this is not going to come down to our pre-work. It's going to come down to our defense of it. And so the key is, how do we prove that we've actually delivered best interest advice? How do you prove that? And I think that there's no other kind of, we'll call it ethical profession that looks similar to financial advice, quite like physicians do. And I've been hearing about this. One of our longtime employees for many years always told me about this survey. And it wasn't until recently that I started looking up. This was from 1997. There's been multiple surveys of physicians and the history of malpractice suit versus the patient satisfaction. And effectively what it concluded is that doctors, even with poor, let's say, surgical outcomes or medical diagnosis, if they had a very high bedside manner, they were unlikely to be sued. Think about that. Does that make any sense whatsoever? I mean, it may make sense to you emotionally, but it doesn't make sense intellectually how doctors who actually have higher failure rates in their surgeries have less malpractice suits if they had good bedside manner or high satisfaction rating. And does that make sense to you? If you communicate with the client, even when times are tough or it didn't go as you would have expected, you build relationship, you build honesty, you build trust. And of course, that communication is really, really critical. So the question I would ask you all is, what are you doing today? And of course, what are you gonna do tomorrow to help communicate with your clients in good times and bad? We cannot be under a rock. Now, if you're already on this call and you're listening to me speak, you're probably proactive around thinking about what are you doing in your practice. You're not sitting there just watching Netflix in the middle of the afternoon, okay? So you're probably doing something about it. But I think the key here is, how can you prove that you did it? So not only must we communicate more effectively with our clients, but we actually have to prove it. And of course, I can't help but get away. I had to draw another cartoon, right? And this is the conversation that I've been pretty much touting for years, which is, if the financial advisors, I'm sorry, if physicians talk the way most financial advisors do with charts and graphs and really communicated something complicated because I wanted to look smart like a technician, I never really showed them an x-ray, I really was actually failing them in the communication. This guy would get sued if the arm doesn't mend well on the boy here, right? Can't you just show us an x-ray and tell us what's going on? My point in this is to think about it this way. Communicate at the consumer level so that you connect with them, you can show them that you're on their team and so forth. And I think I'm going to reiterate what I've said before. If bedside manner, if delivery, if customer experience is actually the one thing that we can all do as deliverer of professional advice to connect with the client and actually protect ourselves from the attack that they might not feel as bad giving if they had no relationship and we never did anything for them, okay? Then the key is we actually have to meet their customer expectations. I would argue that even following all of the best interest regulation standards and of course procedures that we're all gonna have to implement, we just have to implement it, sorry. The most important thing we can do is actually communicate and connect with our clients. How crazy does that sound? It's not crazy though. And it's actually the point, because when you're acting in someone's best interest, you're in it with them together. So the real key is that if we're going to be viewed as consultants, we have to go back to the customer expectations. What are the customer expectations from day one of any consultant? Number one, prove that you know me. Think about that. Prove that you know me. Prove that you know my situation. And prove that you know my options. And we'll make options that are appropriate and select them together. That's it. Can you do that? Can we do that? Do we have a process that proves that I knew the client, I knew their situation, and I know their options continuously? Because if we can't prove this, then we're going to have a problem. So let me share with you a couple of components before I show you actually what we're building to address this. And many of you are doing this in different ways, and we're not sharing this so you can change your process, right? We're hopefully being a catalyst here so that you can make your process better or think about something that you didn't know. So number one, we have to have unparalleled know your client proof over time. All right, clearly you have to do that. Continuous fact finding is not only the key to delivering better and more advice and earning referrals, it's also the way to deliver best interest advice. It's all the way to defend against it. Number two, no matter what you're doing on the financial planning side, you have to constantly re-engage around goals and priority tracking, okay? Because we have to make ongoing recommendations in the best interest environment, not just static ones. I saw you 5 years ago, I told you to buy this, you did, it didn't work out, okay, let's revisit, I'll replace it. Okay, that's not gonna work anymore, okay? That's a shoo-in for someone to come in and say this was clearly not long-term best interest, okay? Number three, we have to actually apply industry expertise, which means if you're not accredited or you're not kind of associating with, I think, the principles of best interest and following this stuff, being part of associations, and you know the ones out there, I'm not going to endorse any, and you're also not potentially getting the accreditations that I think are really deserving these days to get to know holistic advice. I think that's a huge defense component. I think we need to do it, but we got to find a way to deliver more than just our perspective to households. We need to find a way to collaborate and bring in multiple perspectives so that we can show upon defense, no, it's not just me, I'm a financial planner. I brought in this insurance advisor, I brought in this investment advisor, we talked about it, we debated, and we decided this was in their best interest, and that's documented. And if you can't collaborate on your financial planning tool, we have a problem, okay? Because if I can't share this stuff and it's not easy, probably won't happen, okay? Hopefully you're building those resources inside of your firm, or if you don't, you have affiliations and or advanced markets within your organization. We have to start proving that multiple people looked at these households and we all came to the same conclusion. That's defensible. Number four, we have to have clear evidence of the solutions we considered, why and why not. If they chose to not take our recommendations, I want their signature that says that they're not moving forward, because I'm going to protect myself as well. We actually have to be able to produce those presentations, and every single presentation we've ever made. Think about that. How many presentations have we made to our clients over the years? Anybody know where they are? In some cases, they're in shared drives. If you move to virtual or kind of cloud storage years ago, maybe you have every presentation that you've ever sent to them. I know broker dealers are saving all the emails, and there's standards around this that are available through a lot of CRMs today, connecting them so that there's a huge audit trail. But what about the presentations that we made? If I was called to come in front of an arbitrator or even, God forbid, a court and say, well, show us all the things you did for this client over the past 10 years, I need to be able to press a button and I need to be able to get it. And number 6, we need to figure out a way to actually say, no, on this date, we actually provided this. We timestamped the journey milestones. We delivered advice on this day, on this day, on that day, at this time, and I have the resources to back it up. What's your next argument, sir or ma'am? We have to be able to back it up. And I would argue that most of us as advisors haven't necessarily done an awesome job of this unless you're really using your CRM. And by the way, that's what it was for. Many advisors we talked about use the CRM for, let's see, dates of birth, name, social security number, maybe a note or two. Those days are gone. We have to start really using these tools for what they're intended for. And of course, I need to irrefutably provide detailed notes captured and accessible, not just like I talked to John and Mary and they want to do some education funding. I told them to do a 529. That's the end of it. We're talking about detailed notes that are accessible by not just yourself, but that can be pulled together. So how do we do all that stuff, right? You might already know this, by the way. I'm not sure everybody's doing what they know, but let me show you some of the things that we're thinking about. Okay, let me take a deep breath. Obviously, this is asset map. Okay, so let me share with you one of the things that we think is really critical about this. Some of the best practices that we're seeing here, let me just unpause. Some of the best practices that we're seeing in asset map is that advisors are actually not only just collecting this information, but they're giving the asset maps back to clients. They're PDFing them and they're sending them back to them. And then some advisors are actually attempting to update them as much as possible, maybe using round figures and sending it to the client in advance and saying, listen, I'm just checking in. Here's what I know about you. Are there any changes out there? Or, gosh, I noticed that some of these things are missing, or we really never addressed some of these consolidations, or you never sent me statements on these pieces. We found that the visualization really helps a client start to think about their life visually and, of course, validate the fact finding. So you might not know this, but at every click, we actually keep an audit trail of every change that's happened. So if I go in here and I change this and they tell me, oh, you know what? They told me they're making more money today. I know that I've just cataloged that, instantly saved. I don't have to hit save. It's saved and timestamped and audited. Okay, so if I need to provide advice that they told me on this date that there was a change in income, I can do it. We built that for the DOL, and then we never told anybody because, gosh, the DOL went away. But we knew it was coming back. And so the key to this is you have to find a way to be able to back up the fact that you've actually collected information. But if you don't facilitate that by sending this to them, or saying, hey, listen, I was thinking about the kids. Is Joan still doing work study at Penn State? We've got the tuition gap is really big. How are we going to cover this spread with only $20,000? Let's talk about that. Let's spin up a 15-minute virtual meeting so that we can talk about what we're going to do. Should we raid Williams 529? Does that make sense? Or should we come up with money? I have a big question about this. I don't know what to do. Call me, and we gotta spin it up. Of course, if I don't catalog that, boy, we might have a problem. So I'm sharing this with you to impress upon you how critical it is going to be for us to simply PDF this and send it to a client or send them a comprehensive report and do this. And we, by the way, in our group that we started, tend to do this a good amount of times throughout the year. We send this either on demand or just, hey, we're just thinking about you and we're thinking about why we have what we have. Asset map, as you probably already figured out, is all about intentionality. Why do I have this? Does this make sense? Does this make sense? Wait a minute. Wait, is this enough? Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Why? What are we doing here? Is this entirely in cash? And if you're using some really kind of cool other products out there, like I know Riskalyze is a really good integration with us, you can start communicating. You can communicate disparities in these things. So I hope that you're seeing that. Number 2, the second piece that I mentioned beyond a continuous fact-finding environment, right? Showing that we're always engaging about knowing the client. Do you know me? is knowing their situation. And if you're using the target maps or some other planning tool, I want to share with you something that several advisors expressed to us, and we said, gosh, that is brilliant. Very often when clients have expressed multiple issues or concern, typically they tend to be, how do I make sure I'm going to retire on time? And gosh, do we have enough education funding? And well, what happens if, God forbid, we lose somebody? What are we going to do? These typically should be living and continuously breathing conversations that happen every time we meet. And so the way we design asset map target maps is to build a fully integrated financial planning outlet for 2 pages of paper that could be reprioritized and continuously tracking. So you can just see I just reprioritized education. And the key to this is when we want to communicate a singular idea, we should just be able to look at that. I just happened to click on this loss of life for Ben Franklin, but the real thing, the question that I've always been asking is, if I was looking at somebody's best interest as their fiduciary, would I let them leave the office without them having their seatbelts on? Right? I happen to think that we let our clients get away with murder because we accept the fact they want to talk about investments and performance and tax management, maybe structure, but we let them get out of the room without their seatbelts on, right? Their shoes are untied. And the reason I say this to you is because I think a component of best interest advice is also helping them make decisions that they need to make that serves their family. So when there's exposures, we should be pointing those out. That will be part of best interest advice, in my professional opinion. And one of the best ways to actually prove that you're delivering best interest advice is to create these and send them and catalog them on an ongoing basis and say, listen, I think, we're really underfunded for education funding. We've got to really focus on this. I think that we should be saving perhaps as much as, we've got another, let's say 6 years. We should be saving as much as $3,000 a month. That's a big number. Maybe we should reevaluate this. Let me show you how I'm being proactive. For the families that then say, and here's the best practice I'm going to share with you. You know what, Adam? I don't think I want to take action. I think we should be protecting ourselves as advisors. For example, if I tell a client, as an example, okay, Betsy is underinsured, okay? I should print this out in PDF. Oh, I actually did the wrong one. And say, you know what, Benjamin? I appreciate the fact you don't want to cover this. You want to walk around without your seatbelts. Do me a favor. Sign this, and I'm putting it in my file. Sign this and say, I don't want to solve this problem. Whether it's with insurance or I don't care what product you use. I want to know that you're not going to solve this problem. Think about that. Why don't we turn this around? Do you know how many clients I've told to buy life insurance? Because I was like, well, you just can't go around without life insurance. I've lost 4 or 5 clients over the years. Guess what? Some of them had insurance, some of them didn't. I don't want their kids coming back and saying, you didn't deliver best interest advice because you let my parents go around without long-term care insurance, or you didn't sell them to buy disability, or you put them in the wrong investment. I think all this is going to get lumped together, and we need to protect ourselves when we do deliver advice around this topic. Now, another thing I think that's really great is that our team has built in here is this idea of notes. So if you're in the field and you're using this, one of the best ways to defend against best interest advice is to actually put in notes. So perhaps we start taking notes on everything, like saying, talked about it, doesn't care, would rather invest in Tesla. Okay, I don't blame them, but I tell you, I understand. Okay, these types of components need to be part of our standard operating procedure, not only because when we get to the notes and I want to see all the darn notes related to every single instrument, I have this as part of my presentation. So the client is seeing those notes and there's a true transparency. They can see and they've got enough defense, and don't even bother bringing a best interest argument to me, because we've done an extraordinary amount of work on your side and you've got that. I'm not hiding it from you. Okay, so notes is an incredibly valuable component of this. And for those of us that are generating reports, one of the things I'm going to tell this group about that very few people actually know is that when we generate any level of presentation for the client, let's say a typical asset map and maybe some retirement maps and some loss of life and maybe a balance sheet, I don't know. You can kind of figure this out. Once you generate a comprehensive report, There are two things that are going to happen, and we're going to be rolling this out in the next couple months. One is this concept of a milestone, which effectively was really inspired by the best interest advice. And the intent was to say, okay, you know what? This is a client review. I want to make sure that this gets cataloged because it is a client review and I want to be able to search it. And now I want to download the presentation. Where is the presentation going to go? Well, in most cases, this presentation is going to go into your downloaded folders and you're going to have to save it to some place, unless you're using, let's say, something like Black Diamond, where we can push it right in, or Salesforce, we can push the document right into those tools. But what's more important for you guys to know the following is this. For the last 5 years, we've saved every single PDF generated from our platform, over 1 million of them. The reason we did this is because we wanted to set every advisor who used AssetMap up with a defensible position whenever they were called upon for best interest advice, that we could actually provide upon their request, our client's request, that would be the advisor, every single report they ever generated for their client that's timestamped. Think about the value of that. So while our clients have been using many different types of document storage servers, we've been keeping indelible records, you cannot alter them, on our server for your benefit for the past 5 years, every single one of them, because we were preparing for this kind of situation. So that's really critical. And I would ask you, what are you doing if you're not already, or we're going to do it for you, to basically make sure that you've got this kind of defensible posture based upon the process that you've already put in play, okay? And milestone is actually really important because as you think about it, what's going to wind up happening is that we're going to need to be able to report or look at in real time how often or how long it's been since a family has received any type of care. This is a problem. And right now, every advisor and firm can go in there and actually see when a client was modified and where that data kind of sits. And if it's stale, we need to pick up the phone and we need to re-engage fast, because this is going to be the highest indication of likely having a problem on the best interest side. Is we haven't modified anything in 4 years. Tell someone to pick up the phone and schedule an appointment with them right now. Okay, so this is really critical, and we'll be able to track those milestones as well as they evolve for you. Okay, with that, I want to close with one last component before we go to open up to questions. And it's a critical piece which I have been seeing is unfortunately missing. If you recall the last list that I told you, I said that irrefutably detailed notes, captured and accessible, is got to be in there. But I don't know about you, I don't have enough time to actually type all my notes. So this is a product from Mobile Assistant. One of our partners who's actually doing this is what I use as well. They built in what's called an assistant into their dictation service, which enables you to actually say, okay, this is a best interest meeting, click on it, and it will walk you through while you're dictating, what are the questions to answer? What was the client? When did you meet them? What was the intent? What's the follow-ons? What was your specific recommendation? And then you could just audio the whole thing. It gets returned to you within some number of hours in text, all formatted the way that you just did it. And then it actually, if it's integrated with your CRM, it pushes it into the CRM. Locked and loaded, completely done. That means that your audio ability, your ability to communicate, right, stream of consciousness, tell me everything specifically that happened in that meeting, doesn't have to be limited to your memory at the end of the day, or the notes you tended to scribble out on your yellow pad. That's not going to work anymore. So this is going to be, I think, table stakes for all of us. We have to be able to do this fast. So with that in mind, I know I just deluged you with a whole bunch of information. Let me bring Allison back and let's get to questions.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Great. So we do have a couple questions, a couple comments. So for those who asked if the session was recorded, yes, of course. I know one or two of you may have had a couple of audio issues, so we will absolutely be sending out the recorded webinar to those who registered and those who joined. So if you don't get it, just feel free to let us know. But yes, recorded, of course. So one question came up. As far as, if we've had any discussions with hidden levers, as far as an integration or partnering together.
That's more of a question for you as Director of Partnerships. I mean, we've had a couple requests for hidden levers, but we haven't executed. If that's demanded by a general group of the population, we can prioritize it.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you guys have, just as a side note, if you have integration kind of wish list requests, questions about that, absolutely feel free to email us and customer support will send it over to me if it's an integration related question. So we got lots of demand for different partners and we definitely prioritize based on interest. Good questions. So next up, Adam.
Yes.
Let's see. Wow, we just got a whole bunch all at once. Does Mobile Assistant have a best interest template?
You know what? The good thing about Mobile Assistant is they allow you as the advisor or firm to build your own templates. I built my own. I actually built an asset map review template, which asks the questions that I wanted to ask, mostly because I wanted to catalog certain things in my files. But I've made templates for blogs, for all kinds of stuff that I tend to record and want formatted a certain way. But I believe, theoretically, and I think they have actually delivered a new client review template, which is best interest minded. But the good thing is that you can design your own. You don't have to. It's so easy. It took 3 minutes. Like, it's not rocket science.
No, the good news is Corey just wrote in and answered that question. So we do have a client review activity task and phone call template automatically loaded. So it pretty much mirrors what Adam said, but thanks for the input, Corey. Wonderful. Next up. So we have a cool comment that I wanted to add in, but we're getting so many in, I'm trying to find the right spot. Will these slides be made available or potentially be made available for us to help us talk to our clients about best interest since they were so informative?
That's a good question. I'll leave that to you. I think what we are going to do is we tend to package a recording just because of branding purposes. And we don't want people to change this content. So if it serves you, I'll let you know that you could probably just show the video with audio off and pause. That's probably how we'll do it. We haven't been sharing slides recently, but thank you for asking. I'll take that as a compliment.
Wonderful. Next question. If I'm going to send my client an asset map, how do you recommend that I send it securely?
Well, clearly, most broker dealers have a send secure option, and so you should, when you download your PDF, you want to copy and paste that or drag that PDF right into the email body and send it secure. Some email platforms have a workaround for mobile devices like iPhones, and where you can type pound secure pound. That's the number sign pound, which is also a way to do it. But typically, for all of you out there, we're going to need to move to secure emails if you're not there already, because email can get hacked and you want to make sure the recipient is appropriate. By the way, for those of you that don't know, when we designed the asset map report, one might argue that the asset map report itself is a pretty good treasure map. And even though there's no real PII in there, it could be pretty valuable to the wrong hands. And so one of the things that we were clear when we designed the PDF is that it's not scrapable for text. It's actually an image file, high-res image file, so that a computer can't just scan all the text inside of an asset map. So there are actual kind of features we built into the thing that would protect from kind of auto crawling and scanning your emails. But even such, you probably still want to send it secure because it's just good practice.
Great.
By the way, just think about it yourself. Again, best interest advice means you're acting in somebody's best interest, right? Would you want to receive your email not secure? Like, can I send you your tax returns through my Gmail? I would not recommend it. Okay. We all know Gmail is already reading all our emails anyway, because I get ads that have stuff to do with my email. So I don't, who knows what they're doing. Send it secure.
Now that you've scared everyone, on to the next question.
Right. Well, just tell the truth.
Question, did I hear that all changes made to an asset map are backed up somewhere inside of asset map?
Well, what you heard, I think it was Randy's, I saw that. What you heard, what do I want to tell you heard? What you heard was, I said that every time a change is made to an instrument, in other words, on the data side, so we put data in, it's timestamp actually when that data was changed. Okay, and that's actually available to you. You can look in the details page of every one of those modals, Randy, and you can see the last date that information was changed. So you got to imagine we're actually collecting it on the back-end server. What I also mentioned was that we are actually collecting, whenever a PDF generation is created, we're actually collecting that. And it is accessible. We haven't built a user interface for it, but we know where to get it for you if you need it, or tell you how to get it. point is that we'll be working on more of that investing further and delivering a defensible audit structure to somebody in a package. My panacea has always been, and it's not there yet, my panacea would be, oh, audit button, click button, here's 800 pages. There's my defense. Okay, let me go back to work. Okay, so that was always going to be my panacea, say that I would be an asset map and I was going to be bulletproof that way. Because who wants to read 800 pages, right? We're the antithesis of that. But I'm going to give you every report that's ever been generated on this client's behalf. There have been times throughout my own history where I wanted that, right? Because someone was being snarky. But I think that that's going to be the new norm. And so we're building in advance of being asked.
Great. Nice comment from one of our Asset Map fans, Don. He mentioned that since Adam's been doing a bunch of these webinars to educate, fellow advisors in the last few weeks, both about, best interest and remote meetings, that Don has been able to secure $6 million in net new assets in his niche in the last just 2 weeks using target maps and asset maps. So thank you for sharing that. That is wonderful news for you.
Congratulations. Thank you for sharing that.
All right, let's hop back down to see if there's any new questions. Should we go back into Asset Map and add any old notes to Asset Maps? Best practice there.
That's a good question. I've been using the notes more as a handout. So do you remember the years where clients asked us for executive summaries? Or maybe we took it upon ourselves to summarize our 90-page report because we knew they weren't going to read it and we didn't want to bore them. I've been using the notes feature actually as a preemptive, I'm not going to say it, but close to it, summarish of, where is it? I went off of it. Okay. The notes for me, and this can be PDF'd it, and actually if there are web links in here, they are actually fully clickable. So if we did put actually, information in here, we can actually jump to it. So it's actually, even in PDF form, it's really cool. You can see how I'm tending to use it, right? I tend to put the date and say, okay, are the wills up to date? Are they? Yes. Okay, Don. Cross it off. And I keep it there because I want to make sure that Ben sees this too. Ben sees the archival history of what we've done for them, right? What is Millie concerned about? What would be the families responsible if we had long-term care for mama? And then, are there sufficient assets? That's a great question. I want to put that in front of them. Maybe we can use the notes to put the real big issues, the topics that we want to talk about, right? What's the exit plan for your big 401k? Do we know how we're going to maximize income? Gosh, what does he want to do? So I tend to use this as a single page, here, do this, right? And I can bold the things I want the client to do. Right, so if I want the client to do this one and get me a statement, or I might bold it. So that's how we've been experimenting. Remember, you might know, Notes has only been available for about 3 or 4 months. And so we're still experimenting. And Jordan reminded me that if you wouldn't mind going in here and also sending feedback, if you click on this feedback loop, it'll actually communicate directly with us. And you could say, no, we want you to do an integration with hidden levers, and we think it would be great if it did this, or I don't like this, can you do that? And then our product team gets this and is cataloging this to decide what to prioritize. So please actually take the time to do that. That's really valuable for us, and it will wind up being really be valuable for you. Allison, I think we only have time for one more question because I got to close this up and leave some other ideas and thoughts.
Let's see. Oh, here we go. Are target maps that have been deleted by the advisor archived in any way in case we might need to retrieve them?
That's a good question. Right now, they are not. So if you have active target maps like this one, and I go into it and I delete it, then the active script around this one is gone. I'm just going to delete it. That one is gone. Now, granted, the archival print. So if you memorialize this through PDF and say, okay, time and line, stamp this thing, save it in my client archive for easy access, or I just told you, we just created a backdoor storage for you. Then that component of it is safe, but the ongoing tracking is not. And that's why you'll tend to see, I tend to keep a lot of the old target maps and I drop them down to the bottom. There's actually time stamping for all of these. And if I'm going to use my pen tool here for a second, you can see this is a, oops, I guess I messed around with my thing. This was created 8 months ago, but it recalculates, there you go, a few seconds ago at the bottom. I don't know if you can read that. So I'm tending to keep these older runs because I want to bring them back up to the 4A. I want to talk about them every once in a while. Plus, you could also argue, you remember this conversation we had 5 years ago? We were planning of retirement being $100,000 a year. Now we're thinking of it being $120,000. You can see we keep tracking those goals just in case we change our minds, change the conversation. Again, I would argue, and what I've learned over the years, is the value of an advisor is not point in time. It's over a long period of time, many points, right? We're supposed to be guides. We're not supposed to know how to actually get from here to there 500 miles away. We're supposed to know how to help them make decisions and change direction throughout that experience. And that means we got to be there holding their hand. And I think that is the best interest alignment, isn't it? That's really the whole point. With that, let me shift. I know that if some of you did have questions that didn't get answered, we'll communicate to you. I want to share with you one of the things that we've decided to do. We've been running boot camp for the past several years, and unfortunately, because of the situation, we've been moving them online. So we do have one that's coming up. We call this boot camp 101 and 201. We're going to be running them in 3 days back to back. So for those of you that are really looking to, accelerate your learning curve for Asset Map 101, it's 4 hours straight of me and my team basically explaining all of the hidden gems in Asset Map to really bust that 6-month curve. And we also have, for a limited number of individuals, a collaborative program. It's 2 days. You can see we run it in the latter part of the day. That'll be Thursday and Friday from 12:30 to 5 p.m. Eastern, so that our West Coast friends can join. And we just do 4 hours of total immersion plus breakouts with other best practices, find out what other guys and gals are doing. That's our best stuff. That's the real revenue generator for Asset Map with the language. I know several of you on this call I recognize have been in it and have done it, so it's great to see your faces and names at least on the web. But this has been something that's a real great pet project of mine, and so we invite you to be part of this. You might notice there's a website at the top. You can Google it. Just type Google Asset Map Bootcamp. It'll take you there. You can register. It's half the price of what we would normally do, and we're seeing a lot of people take it. So grab your slot. It's in 2 weeks, I guess. That's important if you want to just jumpstart. And then, of course, let me leave you with this thought. I keep mentioning this because it keeps coming up again and again, which is this idea that the real future of financial advice delivery is about advisor intelligence. All the tech's going to look the same. There's going to be artificial intelligence all over the place, robo, advisor tech, all this other fun stuff. The real differentiator is going to be the people on this call and how we deliver that advice. So let's find ways to elevate the humanity and the condition of where we deliver advice in real time. And I think this is the future of it. Let's compete there. That means we got to get smarter. We got to actually, delegate processes that don't serve us and our clients and put our time and attention back into our clients. So with that, I want to ask Allison to, I'll thank you, first of all. Thank everybody for being here. Please be safe with your families. Any way we can help you or support you in your process, please let us know. If you don't ask for help, we never know to help you. So please do that. And with that, thank you so much for being part of our community, and we look forward to the next program. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Adam. Everybody have a great day.